Good evening, family. We've all been there, standing at the edge of a gap, that space between where we are and where we dream to be. That gap, it can feel like a canyon too wide to cross. And if we're honest, sometimes we don't even want to look at it. Because the gap reminds us of what we don't have, what we didn't do, or who we thought we'd be by now. The gap is that uncomfortable, undeniable space between where we are and where we desire to be. It shows up in every area of our lives, our careers, relationships, finances, and even within ourselves. It's the place where our potential whispers of possibility, but our present reality tells a story that feels far from complete. Acknowledging the gap is one of the most difficult yet transformative steps we can take. It's not easy to face the disparity between our dreams and our current circumstances. It requires courage to admit that something is missing, that there is work to be done, or that we're not quite where we thought we'd be. So often we avoid even looking at the gap. It's easier to bury ourselves in distractions, blaming external factors, or convincing ourselves that things are good enough. But deep down, we know, we feel the tension, the longing, the ache that reminds us we're capable of more. Ignoring the gap doesn't make it disappear. It only magnifies the frustration and keeps us stuck. Acknowledging the gap isn't about shaming yourself for where you are. It's not about dwelling on what you lack or criticizing yourself for not being further along. It's about honesty. It's about standing in the truth of your situation without letting it define your worth. This is not a moment of defeat. It's a moment of clarity. When you acknowledge the gap, you're choosing to see it for what it is, an opportunity for growth and transformation. What makes the gap so daunting is the way it exposes vulnerability. It can bring up feelings of inadequacy, fear, or even failure. You might question your abilities, your decisions, or whether you're truly capable of bridging that space. But acknowledging the gap isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to ask the right questions. Where am I now? Where do I want to be? What is standing in the way? These questions invite us to reflect, to pause, and to see the gap not as a void, but as a canvas. Acknowledging the gap also means letting go of the illusions we've built to protect ourselves. Sometimes we downplay our dreams or settle for less because it feels safer than confronting the work it will take to get there. But playing small doesn't serve anyone, least of all yourself. When you deny the gap, you deny the greatness that's waiting to emerge from it. In this process, grace becomes essential. The gap is not a punishment. It's a process. It's not there to make you feel unworthy. It's there to remind you that growth is a journey, not a destination. Acknowledging the gap is an act of faith, a declaration that you believe in the possibility of more. It's saying, I see the space between where I am and where I want to be, and I choose to step into it with hope. The first step to transformation is acknowledgement. It's a sacred moment of recognizing that you are not yet finished, but you are also not defeated. The gap is not the end. It's the beginning of a greater story. The pain of the gap is a unique kind of discomfort. It's the weight of knowing that something is missing, the ache of unfulfilled potential, and the tension of living between where you are and where you long to be. The gap isn't just a space. It's a battleground where emotions, doubts, and fears collide. It's a reminder of what hasn't been achieved, of dreams deferred, and of the hard truths we sometimes avoid. Daniel, and that pain, while deeply uncomfortable, is impossible to ignore. One of the most challenging aspects of the pain is its ability to make us feel stuck. The gap can feel like an unbridgeable chasm, as if no matter how hard we try, we'll never close the distance. This sense of being caught in limbo can drain hope and make even the smallest step forward feel overwhelming. It's the frustration of trying your best and still feeling like it's not enough. It's the sting of looking at others who seem to have crossed their gaps effortlessly while yours feels insurmountable. The gap also has a way of amplifying our insecurities. It whispers lies about our worth, convincing us that the space between where we are and where we want to be is evidence of our inadequacy. If you were smarter, stronger, or more disciplined, you wouldn't be here. It taunts. And sometimes we believe it. The gap can make us question whether we're even capable of achieving the dreams we hold so close. It can turn self-doubt into a constant companion, overshadowing the progress we've made and blinding us to the possibilities ahead. There's a loneliness that comes with the pain of the gap. Even when surrounded by people, it can feel like no one truly understands the struggle you're facing. You may feel isolated, as if you're the only one who hasn't figured it out. The gap can make you withdraw, hiding your struggles out of fear that others will judge or misunderstand you. This loneliness compounds the pain, making the journey feel even heavier to bear. For many, the pain of the gap is also tied to the past. It's not just about where you are now, but the path that brought you here. Regret, guilt, or unresolved wounds can anchor you in place, replaying moments that you wish you could change. The gap becomes a space where old failures resurface, convincing you that history will repeat itself. Yet perhaps the most painful aspect of the gap is the waiting. The in-between can feel like wasted time, a season of life that holds more questions than answers. It's the tension of wanting to move forward while not knowing how, of being ready for change but unsure when it will come. The waiting tests patience, faith, and endurance in ways that often feel unbearable. The pain of the gap is real, raw, and deeply personal. It's a reminder of our humanity, of our desire for more, and of the challenges that come with growth. It's not a place anyone chooses to stay, but it's a place we all inevitably pass through. Awareness is a powerful catalyst for change. It's the moment when the fog clears and you can finally see things for what they are. It's the quiet realization that the gap you've been avoiding isn't just an obstacle, it's an opportunity. Awareness is not about immediate answers or solutions. It's about clarity. It's about coming face to face with your truth, no matter how uncomfortable or challenging it may be, and recognizing the potential that lies within the tension of the gap. Awareness begins with honesty. It requires you to stop running, stop numbing, and stop pretending. It's easy to stay busy, distracted, or complacent, avoiding the deeper reflection that awareness demands. But true awareness forces you to pause and take a hard look at your life, your patterns, your choices, and even your fears. It's not about judgment or self-criticism. It's about understanding. Why do I feel stuck? What's holding me back? What am I afraid to confront? These questions open the door to awareness, shining a light on the hidden corners of your heart and mind. With awareness comes the ability to see possibilities. Before you're aware, the gap feels like an endless void, but awareness reframes it as a space for growth. It helps you realize that the very act of acknowledging the gap is the first step toward filling it. It shifts your perspective from helplessness to empowerment, showing you that while the gap may be daunting, it's also filled with potential. Awareness helps you recognize that your current situation is not permanent and that change is within your reach. Awareness also brings focus. When you're aware of the gap, you can begin to identify what truly matters. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by everything you think you should do or be, but awareness helps you prioritize. It gives you the clarity to distinguish between what is essential and what is simply noise. Instead of scattering your energy in every direction, awareness allows you to channel it intentionally, taking deliberate steps toward closing the gap. Perhaps most importantly, awareness invites grace. When you become aware of your struggles, your shortcomings, and your fears, it's tempting to be hard on yourself. But true awareness is rooted in compassion. It reminds you that growth is a process and that the gap is not a reflection of failure, but of progress yet to come. Awareness gives you the space to honor where you've been, accept where you are, and believe in where you're going. Awareness is transformative because it disrupts autopilot. It pulls you out of routine and forces you to engage with your life in a deeper way. It's the moment when you stop existing and start living with intention. While awareness alone doesn't fill the gap, it lays the foundation for everything that follows. It's the spark that ignites action, the clarity that fuels purpose, and the courage that sustains growth. In becoming aware, you begin the journey of transformation, one step closer to bridging the gap. Filling the gap isn't something that can be done by wishful thinking or hoping for the best. It requires action, intentional, deliberate steps toward closing the distance between where you are and where you want to be. The gap doesn't fill itself. It demands your involvement, your energy, and your commitment. The realization that the gap can only be filled by action is often the moment when the weight of change becomes real. It's one thing to acknowledge the gap, to become aware of the gap, but it's entirely another thing to step into it and begin the process of transformation. Action doesn't always mean grand sweeping changes. It's not about taking one giant leap to fill the gap in a day. Instead, it's about the small, consistent steps that accumulate over time. It's waking up each day with the decision to move forward, even when it feels like progress is slow. The journey to filling the gap is built upon small choices, doing the work even when you don't feel like it, making the effort when it's hard, and staying disciplined when the end goal feels far off. It's in these moments of persistence that the gap begins to shrink. Action requires courage because it means facing the unknown. It's easy to stay stuck in a place of comfort or familiarity, even if that place isn't where you ultimately want to be. The gap represents a challenge, a shift from the status quo. But it's in taking that first step, no matter how daunting, that we begin to transform the gap from a space of fear into a space of possibility. The fear of failure, rejection, or not being good enough often paralyzes us, keeping us from moving forward. But action means choosing courage over fear, trusting that every step you take is one step closer to the life you desire. Action also requires discipline. The gap is not filled in moments of inspiration alone. It's filled in the quiet moments of consistent effort. It's the discipline to show up when it's hard. It's the work you do behind the scenes when no one is watching that begins to move you closer to your goals. Whether it's learning a new skill, taking time to heal, or investing in your growth, the discipline to do what's necessary, even when it's uncomfortable, is what creates momentum. Sometimes filling the gap requires us to act against our own self-doubt. There will be times when the gap feels too wide to cross, when the task ahead feels insurmountable. During these moments, action may feel like a leap of faith. It's taking the first step without having all the answers, trusting that the next steps will become clearer as you move forward. The path may not always be linear, and you may face setbacks along the way, but every action you take is part of the process of growth. Ultimately, filling the gap requires a commitment to yourself. It's a promise to not settle, to not let the distance between where you are and where you want to be define your worth or limit your potential. The gap is not a place to stay stagnant, but a place to rise. And the only way to rise is through action. Small, intentional, and consistent. Every choice you make, every effort you put in brings you one step closer to filling the gap and realizing the future that awaits you. Faith and community are the lifelines that sustain us as we navigate the gap. The journey of growth and transformation is rarely a solitary one, nor is it meant to be. It is faith that anchors us in hope, and it is community that reminds us we are not alone. Together, they provide the strength, encouragement, and connection needed to face the challenges of the gap and move toward the fulfillment of our potential. Faith is what keeps us moving when the gap feels overwhelming. It's the belief that there is purpose even in the struggle, that the gap is not a sign of failure, but an invitation to trust in something greater than ourselves. Faith allows us to see beyond our limitations, beyond the fear and doubt, and into the possibilities that lie ahead. It reminds us that the gap, no matter how wide or daunting, is not. insurmountable. With faith, we find the courage to take steps forward even when the path is unclear. Faith also reminds us that the process of filling the gap is not entirely up to us. It teaches us to lean on divine guidance, to trust that there is a plan even when we can't see it. The gap is often where faith is tested and refined. It's in the waiting, the uncertainty, and the struggle that our faith deepens. We learn to surrender control, to let go of the need to have all the answers, and to trust in the timing and provision of a higher power. While faith anchors us spiritually, community grounds us relationally. The gap can feel isolating, but community reminds us that we're not the only ones navigating challenges. When we open ourselves up to others, we find strength in shared experiences and encouragement in collective wisdom. Community becomes a source of inspiration, showing us that others have faced their own gaps and found ways to bridge them. In times of doubt or weariness, community offers the support we need to keep going. It's the friend who listens without judgment, the mentor who offers guidance, or the group that surrounds us with prayer and encouragement. Community lifts us up when we feel like giving up, reminding us that we don't have to carry the weight of the gap alone. Faith and community are also intertwined in powerful ways. A faithful community can become a beacon of hope, a place where we find the resources, accountability, and encouragement needed to stay the course. It's in these spaces that we are reminded of our worth, our purpose, and the potential waiting on the other side of the gap. Together, faith and community transform the gap from a place of struggle into a place of growth. They remind us that we are supported both spiritually and relationally, that we are not defined by the gap, and that we are equipped to overcome it. Faith and community make the gap a space where transformation is not only possible, but inevitable. Transformation happens in the gap because it's the place where growth becomes unavoidable. The gap, though uncomfortable and often overwhelming, is a space that challenges us to evolve. It's not a passive experience. It's an active process that demands change, resilience, and renewal. In the gap, you are stripped of illusions and forced to confront the truth of who you are, what you want, and what stands in your way. It's in this tension between the now and the not yet that transformation takes root. What he says is what you do. The gap is where you are tested, not just in your abilities, but in your character. It reveals the depth of your patience, the strength of your faith, and the resolve of your commitment. When everything feels uncertain and the path ahead is unclear, you are faced with a choice: stay the same or grow through the discomfort. The gap forces you to dig deeper, to tap into reserves of courage and perseverance you didn't know you had. It's not easy, but transformation rarely is. Growth requires discomfort, and the gap provides the space where that discomfort can lead to breakthrough. Transformation in the gap isn't just about achieving external goals. It's about internal growth. It's where you learn to let go of old mindsets, habits, and fears that no longer serve you. The gap becomes a place of refinement where you shed the layers that have been holding you back. It's where you learn to silence the voices of self-doubt and insecurity and begin to embrace your potential. Transformation in the gap is as much about who you are becoming as it is about where you are going. In the gap, you develop resilience. The challenges and setbacks you face teach you how to adapt, how to keep moving even when progress feels slow. Each small victory builds confidence, proving to yourself that you are capable of more than you realized. The struggle of the gap, though painful, is what strengthens you for the journey ahead. It's the fire that forges your character and prepares you for the next chapter of your life.